My dad, my brother, and my mom left me at a Colorado rest stop and just drove off. No text, no call. 3 years later, they showed up at my job asking for help. So I handed them a check for the bus fare. $62. They called it a family trip, but it felt more like a slow-motion punishment. We were crammed into Dad's ancient Chevy Tahoe, on our way to Uncle Ricky's wedding in Utah, and the car already smelled like beef jerky and stale coffee. My name's Salvador. I'm 26 years old, still living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the same small town I grew up in. Still working the same dead-end job at my dad's hardware store. Still stuck. I never wanted to go on this trip, but saying no would have just given them more ammunition. Alan, my older brother by 3 years, sat in the front seat like he owned the world. He always did. He got the window seat, the AUX cord, and all of Dad's respect. Me? I was shoved in the back, next to the cooler and Mom's knitting bag. Try not to fall asleep and drool on the snacks, Alan smirked, glancing back at me. Dad barked out a laugh. Leave him alone, Al. He's not used to being outside for this long. Mom stayed quiet, eyes glued to the road like she could disappear into it. That was her thing, passive observation. She never joined in, never stopped it either. She was always just there. I stared out the window, watching the desert blur by. The tension in the car felt like static, low-level and constant. Every mile we drove made it worse. Every joke Alan cracked at my expense was another needle under my skin. And Dad, well, he never missed a chance to join in. You sure you packed enough socks? He asked at one point. Wouldn't want your delicate feet blistering halfway to Moab. Alan snorted. Yeah, he might need Mom to carry him. They laughed. Mom gave a faint, uncomfortable smile. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. By the time we hit the Colorado border, I was numb. We pulled into a rest stop that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the 80s. Just a row of cracked vending machines and a couple of bathrooms that smelled like bleach and defeat. I'm gonna stretch my legs, I muttered. Alan tossed me a plastic water bottle. Try not to get lost. I walked a few yards away, trying to breathe. The sky was huge out there, open and endless. I didn't hear them drive off. I only noticed because the low hum of the Tahoe was suddenly gone. I turned around. The parking lot was empty. For a few seconds, I just stood there, blinking, waiting for the joke to end. It didn't. They were gone. No call. No text. No tire tracks. Just me and the wide Colorado sky. At first, I thought they'd loop back around. That this was just another of Alan's dumb jokes. But 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. That's when I knew. This wasn't a prank. They left me. Like I was nothing. And I think, in their minds, I was. I sat on the cold concrete bench near the vending machines, gripping the bottle of water Alan tossed me like it might explain something. The air was dry, the sun was high, and somewhere between Santa Fe and nowhere, my family decided I wasn't worth the ride. The sun crept higher as I sat on that concrete bench, watching cars pass on the highway like I wasn't even there. It felt surreal, like I was the background character in someone else's road trip. Just some guy at a rest stop. I waited an hour before I accepted it. They weren't coming back. I stood up slowly, legs stiff, throat dry. I still had my wallet, but there wasn't much in it. A debit card connected to an account that barely held $40, a license, and 2 wrinkled receipts from a gas station in Tucumcari. There was a payphone by the bathroom, old and sun-faded. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if I should call. My dad? Alan? My mom? But I didn't. I couldn't. Somewhere deep in my chest, that spot that always hoped they'd treat me better finally caved in on itself. It wasn't anger, not yet. Just a quiet, exhausted clarity. I walked up to a couple sitting in a beat-up Subaru, just about to pull out of the lot. I kept my hands visible, non-threatening, like I was trying to convince a stray dog not to run. Excuse me, I said. My voice cracked. Sorry to bother you. My family left me here. I need help. The woman turned in her seat, eyes wide. Her husband leaned over the steering wheel. They left you? Yeah, just took off, I said, trying to laugh like it was a bizarre story and not a raw wound. They exchanged a glance. The woman reached for her purse and handed me a phone. I didn't call my family. I called the number for the nearest shelter. I'd looked it up once when things got rough at home, just to know I had a place to go. Grand Junction wasn't too far. The Subaru couple gave me a ride without asking many questions. I sat in the back, staring out the window as the scenery flew past, feeling like a shadow of myself. The shelter was a gray cinder-block building tucked behind a used car lot. The intake counselor, Carla, had warm eyes and a clipboard she never put down. You're lucky, she said. We've got a cot open. I don't feel lucky, I muttered. She didn't ask much. Just enough to get me into the system. I gave her the basics, name, age, no job, no criminal record. Left out the part about my family treating me like dead weight for years. That night, lying on a thin mattress with a flickering ceiling light above me, I thought about my life. Every time I stayed late at the hardware store while Alan left early. Every joke that landed on my shoulders. Every time Mom looked away. I made a decision right then. I wasn't going back. Not to Santa Fe. Not to my family. Not to being the one they could laugh at and leave behind. If they didn't want me, fine. But they'd never get the chance to use me again. The next morning, I walked to a diner 3 blocks from the shelter. I asked for the manager and said I'd do anything, dishes, floors, whatever. Just needed a shot. Can you start tonight? The woman asked. I nodded, even though I had no idea what I was doing. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting around to be rescued. The diner was called Sonny's, though I never met a Sonny. The place smelled like burnt bacon and cleaning fluid, and the radio was always stuck on some tinny country station. But it was warm, and it paid cash under the table for the first few weeks, which was all I needed. Geraldine was the manager. 60-something, silver bun, voice like a cigarette drag. She didn't smile much, but she didn't bullshit either. You show up on time, you stay on your feet, and you don't complain, she told me that first night. That's all I care about. I can do that, I said. And I did. I washed dishes until my hands cracked from the hot water. I took out the trash, wiped down booths, scraped gum off the underside of tables. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real work. And nobody treated me like I was in the way. A week in, Geraldine tossed me a bundle of papers. Get yourself a new ID. You're gonna be on the books starting next month. The photo on that emergency state ID was awful, me with greasy hair, hollow cheeks, but I didn't care. It felt like a start. Like proof I was here, not just some guy who got left behind at a rest stop. I used my first real paycheck to buy a prepaid phone. No contacts. No photos. Just a lifeline if I needed it. It rang 2 days later. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. Sal, it's Mom. Her voice was soft, like she was already bracing for me to hang up. We realized you weren't in the car after a little while, but your dad said you'd find a way. Said it would toughen you up. I didn't agree, but anyway, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I deleted the message. 5 minutes later, she called again. I answered this time. Salvador? She said, relieved. Don't call me again, I said, my voice flat. You didn't lose me. You left me. Sal, honey, I ended the call and blocked the number. Then I went through the rest of the family contacts, Alan, Dad, even Aunt Carrie, and blocked them all. One by one. No more check-ins. No more guilt trips. No more pretending they gave a damn. The shelter let me stay for 30 days. By then, I had saved up enough to rent a room in a rundown boarding house with a busted heater and paper-thin walls. But it was mine. I worked every shift Geraldine would give me. Doubles, graveyards, holidays, didn't matter. The ache in my feet was better than the ache I used to feel every time Alan opened his mouth. Some nights I'd lie in bed listening to the wind whistle through the window frame, wondering if they'd ever think about me, if they ever felt even an ounce of regret. But most nights, I didn't think about them at all. I was too busy building something they couldn't tear down. Piece by piece, I was becoming someone else. Someone free. 2 years passed in Grand Junction before I realized I'd stopped counting. Sonny's became more than just a paycheck. I started as a dishwasher, then a busser, then line cook. Geraldine never praised me directly, she wasn't built like that. But when the assistant manager quit, she slid me the keys to the supply closet and said, don't screw it up. I didn't. By then, I moved into a real apartment. Just a 1-bedroom over a pawn shop, with crooked cabinets and squeaky floors, but it had a lock on the door and a window that faced the sunrise. Every month, I paid rent on time. Every month, I watched my savings inch up from nothing to something. I didn't talk to anyone about my past. Not the guy who cut my hair for $10, not the cook who used to work construction, not even Geraldine. If people asked where I came from, I'd just say, down south. They stopped asking after that. Still, the silence was louder some days than others. The first Christmas alone hit me like a brick. I bought a microwave dinner and ate it at the diner after closing, just me and the humming fridge. The streets outside were lit up with plastic Santas and blinking lights, and for a second, I almost called my mom. Just to hear a voice I used to know. But then I remembered that voice at the rest stop, the way they didn't even slow down. And I stayed quiet. The loneliness didn't go away, but I got used to it. There was something calming about having no one to disappoint. I filled my nights with work, and when that wasn't enough, I started researching online classes. Business management. Accounting. Stuff I'd never thought I could handle before. I bought a second-hand Chromebook off a teenager in the parking lot and used the free Wi-Fi at the library to apply for a state grant. The classes were rough at first. I hadn't done real math since high school, but little by little, I figured things out. Budget sheets, supply orders, scheduling. It all clicked. One night after a long shift, I sat on my tiny couch, balancing a spreadsheet and sipping gas station coffee, and realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. Every few months, I'd still get tempted to look them up. My family. just to see. But I didn't. I knew if I opened that door even a crack, they'd come pouring through it, all jokes and guilt and twisted smiles. I wasn't going back. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I wasn't the loser in the back seat. I wasn't the joke. I was Salvador Mendoza, assistant manager at Sonny's Diner, business student, and survivor of a life that tried to swallow me whole. And I was just getting started. It came on a Tuesday. I was on break at the diner, sitting in the alley out back, sipping from a paper cup of Geraldine's sludge-thick coffee. I had just finished submitting a business ethics assignment on my beat-up Chromebook when my phone buzzed. One notification. New email from Irene Mendoza. For a second, I just stared at the screen. I hadn't seen that name pop up in almost 3 years. Not since I blocked every number I could think of. But I guess email was harder to kill. I didn't open it right away. I sat there in the alley, breathing slow, the cold air biting through my flannel. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was past it. But of course I opened it. Salvador. I know you probably won't read this, but I wanted to try. Your Uncle Rick asked about you the other day. Said he hadn't seen you since the wedding. Said it was strange, not hearing from you. We told him you were working a lot. That you were busy. Anyway. I hope you're okay. Love, Mom. That word, Mom, felt so fake now. Like a title she had stopped earning the moment she let them drive away with me still at that rest stop. There was no apology. No real explanation. Just a gentle tap on the window, like she wanted back inside the house after years of leaving me in the cold. I read the email once, then again. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I let myself remember. The rest stop. The look on Alan's face every time he got a laugh at my expense. The silence in the car when I spoke. The way my father could cut me down with just a smirk. The way Mom would pretend not to hear it. And then I remember Geraldine handing me that first schedule. The first paycheck. My tiny apartment with the crooked floor. The business classes I never thought I'd take. The way my hands didn't shake when I looked at a mirror anymore. I went back inside, finished my shift, and didn't mention the email to anyone. That night, I deleted the message. Then I went further. I wiped the email account entirely. Signed out of the number tied to my old life. Tossed the SIM card in the trash. Got a new one the next day with a fresh number. New email, too. No more breadcrumbs for them to follow. It wasn't revenge. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clear. My past didn't own me anymore. It didn't get to sneak in the back door with a soft voice and a story about Uncle Rick. They had let me go once. Now, I was letting them go for good. The first time I saw my father's name on Facebook again, it was in a comment thread under a post about the old hardware store closing. Banks Mendoza retiring, someone wrote. Store's done. Foreclosure. Damn shame, replied another. I read it while on my lunch break, halfway through a bowl of overcooked chili Geraldine had called a chef's special. I scrolled back up and reread it, but it didn't hit me the way I thought it would. There was no satisfaction, just a weird hollowness, like reading a stranger's obituary. Apparently, the family business didn't survive long after I left. I wasn't surprised. My dad never believed in bookkeeping, just handshakes and grumbling about the government. And Alan? He couldn't manage his way out of a drive-through line. Speaking of Alan, I found his Instagram by accident a few weeks later. Someone had tagged Sonny's in a local foodie post, and somehow Alan's profile popped up in the suggested section. At Al the Man and him. Of course. His page was full of inspirational quotes over filtered gym selfies. And buried between those were desperate pitches for business ventures, crypto, multi-level marketing, something about custom supplements. All garbage. All doomed. In one post, he wrote, sometimes you find out the hard way who's really in your corner. Family don't always mean loyalty. There were only 3 likes. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I just kept scrolling. That winter, I started seeing more posts from back home. Public ones. Crying for attention ones. Mom's Facebook went from sunsets and Bible verses to vague quotes about children who turn their backs on the ones who raised them. Dad posted once about how young men today have no respect, followed by a sad photo of the empty storefront, the windows covered in brown paper. Even Alan got in on it. One video had him sitting in a car, looking haggard, saying it's funny how people change when you're the one who needs help. He didn't mention me directly, but he didn't have to. They were unraveling, and they wanted me to see it. But I didn't reach out. I didn't comment, didn't message, didn't send so much as a single emoji. I had a new life now. A real one. Kendra started as a regular at Sonny's. Med student, always in scrubs, always ordering toast and coffee with 2 sugars. At first, I didn't say much. Just refilled her mug, maybe smiled if I was in a good mood. She broke the ice one day by asking, so how many hours a week do you guys actually sleep back here? I snorted. Geraldine says anything over 4 is a luxury. That made her laugh. It was the first time I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me and just saw me. No baggage. No history. No punchlines. Just Salvador, The guy with the apron and bad posture who knew how to work hard and listen better. We started seeing each other quietly. A walk after her shift. A shared sandwich behind the diner. No pressure. No drama. And slowly, I found something I didn't think I'd ever have again. A family of my own. One I chose. One that chose me back. And while the people who left me behind were crumbling, I was growing roots. Right here in Colorado. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. Morning rush at Sonny's had just cleared, and I was at the register helping Geraldine tally the week's sales when the front door swung open and the bell jingled. I didn't look up right away. Not until I heard the voice. Sal? I froze. Nobody called me that here. I looked up, and there they were. All three of them. Dad in his worn-out leather jacket. Alan in jeans that tried too hard and a cheap blazer he probably thought looked expensive. And my mom, smaller than I remembered, holding her purse in both hands like she was at a funeral. The diner went dead quiet. Behind me, Geraldine stiffened. I felt her glance at me. Like, you okay? I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out from behind the counter. What are you doing here? I asked. My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. Alan smiled. Too wide, too fake. Heard you were doing well out here, man. Local paper did a piece on Sonny's last month, didn't it? I said nothing. Mom took a tentative step forward. We just wanted to see you. It's been a long time. No, I said. You didn't just want to see me. Why are you really here? Dad's face tightened. He was never good at pretending. Alan sighed. Okay. We hit a rough patch. You probably already saw stuff online. The store's gone. My business didn't pan out. Mom's had some health things. We just thought maybe. You thought maybe I'd bail you out, I finished for him. They all went quiet. I looked at each of them. At the people who had driven away without me. The people who laughed while I withered. And now they were here, in my place, trying to wear masks like nothing had happened. Dad cleared his throat. You've got a good thing going. We can see that. You made something of yourself. Maybe it's time we put the past behind us. Start over. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out an envelope. Walked it over. Placed it on the table between us. What's this? Mom asked. Open it. Alan flipped it open and pulled out a check. He blinked. $62? The cost of a Greyhound bus ticket from that rest stop in Colorado to Grand Junction, I said. I looked it up the same night you left me. Dad's jaw clenched. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's closure. I leaned forward, eyes locked on his. You don't get to act like nothing happened. You don't get to rewrite history just because you're out of options. You left me. I built a life without you. I don't owe you anything. Alan stepped forward, his voice rising. We're family, Salvador. I shook my head. Family doesn't abandon you at a rest stop. They stood there, stunned, like they'd expected tears or forgiveness, or at least a second chance. They got silence. You should go, I said. Before Geraldine calls the cops for loitering. That shook them. Dad looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it again. Alan muttered something under his breath, but didn't repeat it when I raised my eyebrow. They walked out in silence. I didn't go back to work right away. I stepped out the back door and stood in the alley, hands shaking just a little. Kendra found me there 10 minutes later, leaned against the wall beside me, and didn't say a word. She didn't have to. They had finally seen what I had become, and they knew they had no place in it. Not anymore. Kendra and I got married on a windy spring afternoon just outside Grand Junction, under a borrowed white canopy set up in the back lot behind Sonny's. Geraldine officiated. Said it was her first and last time doing something this damn sentimental, but she showed up in a dress anyway, and I caught her wiping her eyes during the vows. We didn't have a fancy venue. No tuxedos. No flower arrangements flown in from wherever. But I've never been part of anything more real. Marriage with Kendra was easy in all the ways my old life had never been. We talked about everything: finances, dreams, fears, what kind of peanut butter to keep in the house. She won that one crunchy. She pushed me to dream bigger, and when she finally passed her boards and became a full-time nurse, she didn't take a second to rest. She turned right around and started helping me expand the diner. It started with a second Sonny's location on the east side. Geraldine was hesitant at first. Franchising? Don't get greedy, kid. But after I showed her the business plan I drafted during my online classes, she just grunted and said, fine. But I'm keeping the damn name. We found a cheap rental space and fixed it up ourselves. Kendra painted the walls on weekends while I haggled with food vendors. When we opened the doors 6 months later, it was standing room only. That night, we sat on milk crates in the walk-in pantry eating leftover meatloaf, and she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, you really did it. But the truth was, we did. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be a man. I was one. I had a partner, a home, and a business that didn't just survive. It meant something to people. Our son, Mateo, was born just after the second location celebrated its first anniversary. I was terrified the entire pregnancy. convinced I'd screw it up somehow. But the second I held him in my arms, this squirming, red-faced little stranger who somehow looked exactly like both of us, I knew. This kid would never feel what I felt. He would never have to earn my love. He'd never doubt that he mattered. I wasn't just building a new life. I was building a better one. A few months after Mateo was born, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone I hadn't thought about in years. Rick Mendoza. My uncle. The same one whose wedding started this whole mess. I stared at the notification for a while before I clicked on his profile. Nothing dramatic. Just pictures of fishing trips, barbecue grills, a couple of blurry selfies with his grandkids. I checked my messages. There it was. Hey Sal. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened back then. I didn't know. I truly didn't. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, I closed the app and looked over at Kendra, who was sitting on the floor feeding Mateo tiny spoonfuls of mashed sweet potato while he made a mess of the bib. I felt something rise in me. Not fear. Not anger. Just a flicker of the old life trying to find its way back in. I took a deep breath. I got a message from my uncle, I said. Kendra looked up. What did it say? I shrugged. He says he didn't know. Says he's sorry. She studied me for a second. Do you want to talk to him? I don't know, I admitted. But I do know one thing. What's that? I looked at Mateo, his big brown eyes locked on mine, and then at her. My family. My past doesn't get to mess this up. Not ever. She smiled and reached for my hand. And just like that, the decision was made. My future had already started, and I wasn't letting anyone from the past rewrite it. It came through LinkedIn, of all places. I was up late one night, feeding Mateo his bottle while Kendra dozed off on the couch, her hand still resting on the baby monitor. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the tiny slurps of our son sucking milk like it was the most serious job in the world. I opened the app to check a message from a potential vendor. At the top of my notifications, I saw it. Alan Mendoza viewed your profile. Followed by, Alan Mendoza sent you a connection request. For a second, I just stared at it. It had been years. Years since that moment in the diner, when I handed him that symbolic check and shut the door on the wreckage they'd left behind. Since then, I'd made no effort to track them down, and they had made no serious attempts to find me, at least not directly. But now, there he was. A digital knock on a door I'd already bricked shut. I tapped into his profile. It was as curated and phony as I remembered. Buzzwords like entrepreneur and consultant scattered all over. A blurry headshot in front of what looked like a chain restaurant. Probably borrowed someone else's suit. I scrolled through the post history. A few motivational quotes. One selfie of him at a coffee shop. A status about resilience in business that got 2 likes, one from mom. Nothing about the store. Nothing about the crash. But the request was there. Waiting. I didn't feel rage. Or fear. Or even sadness. Just a quiet, detached recognition. He was still reaching. Still trying to pull a thread that no longer existed. I thought about replying. Something sharp and final. I even typed it out. You left me at a rest stop like I was trash. Now you want to network? But then I deleted it. Because the truth was, I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. And I sure as hell didn't need to reconnect with someone who only remembered I existed when he thought I might be useful. I pressed ignore and closed the app. The next morning, Kendra found me making coffee with Mateo on my hip, his little fingers trying to grab the drawstring on my hoodie. Why are you smiling? She asked. I kissed her on the cheek. No reason. Just thinking how far we've come. She looked down at Mateo, then back at me. Yeah, we really have, haven't we? I nodded, tightening my arm around my son. That was the last time I thought about my brother. The connection request faded into digital dust, just another noise I didn't need in the life I had built. Because here's what I finally understood. What you walk away from doesn't define you. What you build in its place does. And I had built something worth holding on to. Something no message from the past could ever touch.